Hello, listeners. Welcome to Woman Inherits the Earth. This is your host, Tessa Dare speaking. You are now listening to part 2 of our discussion on the film Women Talking. If you haven't heard part 1, I suggest going back to our episode from 2 weeks ago and listening to that first. Last time, we covered most of the film's plot and spoke briefly of the book it was based on, as well as the real-life event that the book was inspired by. When we left off, we were discussing the literacy of the characters in the film and how that affects their agency, and whether a gender-imbalanced society could ever be free of sexual assault. This week, we'll be talking about the few humorous moments in the film before heading into our conclusions and, of course, our hot takes. While the rest of our discussion this week heads into slightly more lighthearted topics, I still need to issue a content warning. We will continue to discuss sexual assault this week, as well as the subject of suicide as it pertains to the events of the film. If you are sensitive to either of these subjects, please consider skipping this episode. With that out of the way, please enjoy part 2 of our discussion on Women Talking.
Pacifism, their religion. So, the humor. Okay, let me find it. Oh, there's 2 humorous moments. Okay.
Now,
so
I'm curious to see if the moments that you thought were humorous are the same moments that I thought were humorous.
Okay, so they're in this, I don't know if this happens in the break or what, but all of a sudden we hear Daydream Believer coming and it's like, what the fuck?
I did not see that as one of the humorous moments, but that
okay,
was
all right. I can't even remember what the scene was that was happening. It might have been during the break because they were all doing different things.
They're taking a break, getting food or something, and then
checking on the kids. They're checking on the kids. They're feeding the chickens, and there's a discussion between August and Anche, about education and all these kind of little bucolic things happening, and then the silence of the bucolic mood is broken by this loud blaring playing on loudspeakers on a truck of the Monkees' Daydream Believer. And it's a truck coming through asking them to do the 2010 census, which is our clue that this is set in America. So all the residents must come out and be counted, and nobody reacts at all except the 2 teenagers. And, as someone who has worked in government and worked on getting people to participate in the census, I'm like, first of all, why did the truck come closer? And secondly, why do none of these women react and go out? They don't take it seriously. They don't. It's like, okay, you are in your own government here, but there's a bigger world out there. You need to get counted by the census.
Yeah, I assumed it wasn't that they weren't taking it seriously. I assumed that they have been told all their lives that they're not allowed to participate.
That could be it. Yeah,
that the men don't want them participating. It seemed to me like they were intentionally ignoring it because their men have told them that they are not a part of that wider world and that it would be a violation of their roles as women to talk to that man at all, especially to participate in the census. Also, this is the one moment that tells us what year it is. It's 2010.
Yes, it's 2010. Well, it's probably, it is 2010. It could be a year after that time. But why? But around there, yeah. But why doesn't the truck come closer? If it's his job to get them, he parks way far out and doesn't come in.
Well, first of all, we don't know how good the roads are because this is not a community that normally has cars driving through. And second, again, I'm assuming it's because they've tried to take the census in this community before and have maybe been met with a violent backlash.
Yeah, that could be very, very, very true. So there's another scene where I think is it Agata makes the point that none of us have ever asked the men for anything.
Yes.
Not for salt to be passed or a penny or a moment alone or to open a curtain, but the one and only request would be for them to leave. This is when they're still thinking in terms of telling the men that they have to leave. And then everybody starts laughing because August is still taking the minutes. And this scene, and they just burst into this very healthy laughter, and it seems very real to me because they've been so serious. I mean, these discussions are life and death discussions about their community, but also their individual lives. And it's deadly serious. And then she says, and the one request we would make of them is to leave. And then they all just start laughing, and it's hilarious. And the way I'm not describing it very well, but the way she says it is just so funny. And they get it. They instantly start laughing. And do you want to give your humorous moment? Because it's probably my third one. But you go ahead.
That was one of mine. I didn't note this one down, but there was also the moment where the young girl, I think it was Aucha, pretended to kill herself, where she ran up the stairs saying something like, I can't take it anymore, and then jumped out the barn window, but she jumped into like a big pile of hay, so she was fine.
Did she know the hay is there? Was she really trying to kill herself?
No, I think she
okay.
I think it was a teenager prank moment. But that actually wasn't my other moment. My other moment, I'm not sure was intended as a humorous moment. It's one of the like voiceover moments where they're talking about the men, and then they literally have Marike say, but not all men. I laughed out loud. I laughed so hard. You know, that's like
I don't remember that one.
The meme. Yeah, I mean, it comes in the middle of a bunch of other stuff. They're talking about a bunch of stuff, and they're talking about, like, the men have done this, and the men, you know, are not, they're all capable of violence or something, and then there's just a little brief moment where you hear Marike in voiceover say, but not all men. And I was just like, oh, sure, Marike would be the not all men girl, I guess.
There's another scene that's funny. It's Agatha, right? She's the one.
Actually, I think it's Greta.
It's Greta. Yeah, it's Greta. They've had this very serious discussion, and all of a sudden she just feels like something is very wrong. She says, "Oh, I have to stop you here. I think I'm dying."
Yeah,
and it's like,
I'm sorry. I think I'm dying.
I'm sorry. I think I'm dying. And I started laughing. And then they kind of come over to her, and they're all like, "What's gone? Can you breathe? Are you okay?" She's not having a panic attack. She's not having a heart attack. She just can't see. And then one of the women, I don't know who it is, looks at her and says, "Your glasses are filthy." And as someone who wears glasses and finds sometimes that I can't see and I think I'm dying, that I'm having, a stroke or something because I can't see, and then I take my glasses off and I can see fine. So yeah, your glasses get so dirty sometimes when you get busy, you don't notice it. It's a hilarious scene. So there are 3 or 4 scenes in here that just are great humorous breaks and make it a little bit easier to get through, but they're not enough. Yeah. It's a really hard film to get through.
It's a tough film to get through.
And you were talking about Mary Kay, and I have a comment about Salome. I think she's my favorite. She's Salome, I guess. She's both a realist and the one who seems most in touch with both her own feelings and the hideous nature of the problem that they face. She knows who she is. She knows what she needs. She does change her mind in the end about how they should handle it. But she is very clear all the way through. She is never confused about what's going on. And she says, we know we are bruised and infected and pregnant and terrified and insane. Some of us are dead. Yeah.
A detail that we sort of haven't talked about because it honestly isn't focused on that much in the film. Auche's friend, Netje, I'm not totally sure how to say it, her mother killed herself before the beginning of the film. Mm-hmm. As a direct response.
Yeah, as a direct response to what happened to her. So the other final point I want to make that I didn't realize until I read the Wikipedia entry was that Salome and Ona are actually sisters.
Yeah, I
have the same mother. I assume they have the same father because they have the same mother. So is it Greta or Agate? I forget which one is their mother.
Agatha is their mother, and Greta is Marike's mother because Greta's the one who apologizes to her.
We're probably confusing the listeners because I'm pronouncing the names differently than you are. But anyway, there are 2 older women. One of them is Agatha, which is like Agatha without the H or without the H sound, the TH sound.
Yeah, it's spelled that way, but I'm pretty sure they were saying it Agatha.
Were they? Okay.
Yeah, that's what it sounded like to me. I don't know. I'm not sure that
either
of our pronunciations are right.
Well, my hearing issues wouldn't allow me to distinguish that. So, but Agatha and Greta are the 2 older women. And one of them is the mother of Salome and Ona. Yeah. And 2 more different women, you could not... And we don't really even know until the end of the film that they're sisters. That's how distraught this whole situation is. But anyway, so the end of the film is, my heading is how the decision is made. We've talked about that a little bit. Salome has the most honest response. He says, I will kill, maim, and dance on graves and burn in hell before I let another man satisfy his violent urges with the body of my 4-year-old child. And this is where you got the... Yeah. See, I thought she was talking about in the future, but I think you're probably very right. But, so why doesn't she want to leave? So anyway, but she says,
I think because she wants to kill them. I think that's what she
She
wants
says,
to do.
I will become a murderer if I stay.
Yes.
Salome says, but she changes her mind after discussion about the principles of their faith, which is the one big thing we have left to discuss. So you want to start that?
I think also, I got the impression from Salome from the beginning that she knew that if she couldn't convince the others to stay and kill the men with her, that she would have to go with them. Like, I think she knows that she can't kill all the men on her own. But yeah, so yeah, their faith is a pacifist faith. I don't know. I don't really have that many notes about their faith itself. It more just kind of, it's a part of why I have such a difficult time with this movie, because it feels like the real argument for them not to leave is their faith. They firmly believe in God, and they believe that the male elders are the, human representatives for God, and the male elders have told them that if they don't forgive the rapists of the 4-year-old, that they will not get into heaven. And they all believe that because the elders say that. And they do end up debating it a little bit towards the end, but it takes them a really long time to get there.
Yes.
For the whole movie, the debate is basically, if we leave, we might not get into heaven. And I think it's really hard for me to buy into those kinds of discussions, in part because I was not raised with a religion. So I think on some fundamental level, I don't understand how you can believe in a God that would forgive a man who raped a 4-year-old, but would not forgive that 4-year-old's mother for failing to forgive the man. I just don't see how you can square that in your mind. I think
most good Christians would not agree with this situation. So, and let's just take the most famous Christian pacifist of all time, Martin Luther King, who talked about pacifism as a way to achieve results. So in this story here, the women, pacifism is a central tenet of their faith. By staying here, one of them says, by staying here, if we become violent, we betray that. By staying, we are inviting harm, living in a state of war, turning this colony into a battlefield. We cannot become murderers. We cannot endure more violence, which is why we must leave. I'm not sure who makes that. I'm not sure who makes that argument, because Salome. It must be Greta
or Agatha.
Because Salome and Ona both agree. But the woman who makes it, and it's one of the two elders, I think you're right. But they make that statement based on everything that's been discussed up until then. When they realize where everybody is, that is what they come to, that pacifism requires that they leave. Because if they stay, they will commit murder. And, there's a long history of religion. And, actually, the most famous Christian pacifist is Martin Luther King, but of course he got his ideas from Mahatma Gandhi. So pacifism it's a wonderful idea. It's a wonderful concept. But as any civil rights activist will tell you, it doesn't always work.
Also, Martin Luther King began to change his mind about
yes,
it
he
towards
did.
the end of his life.
Because of his discussions with Malcolm X. Anyway, it's not always... But it's a hard transition to make. You don't want people to get hurt. You don't want anybody to get hurt. But sometimes people get hurt. And so I was kind of torn at the end here. I'm really glad. I hate the whole idea, the whole religious idea about forgiveness was oppressive to me. That they had to, like, the forgiveness has to equal permission, and it doesn't, and I'm not even sure you have to forgive people. I'm really not sure you have to do that.
Yeah.
I think if it's somebody you love who hurts you and is willing to change and stop hurting you, forgiveness is important in that situation. But someone who continues to hurt you and doesn't change their behavior every time, and you've got to stop at some point. You've got to stop and walk away.
Yeah, my feeling about forgiveness, yes, if it's someone who you love and you still want to maintain a relationship with, and what they've done hasn't had, like, irrevocable consequences,
right?
Then sure, you can forgive that person maybe and continue to be in a relationship with them. My feeling about forgiveness in the abstract is I do not think you owe anyone forgiveness for their sake. For me, the main positive of forgiveness, let's say you are someone who has experienced abuse or sexual assault in your past, For me, the main point of forgiveness is so that you can move on and not have that define your life anymore.
Yes, that's a very good point. Very good point.
And apart from that, I don't like. I think that is the only inherent virtue of forgiveness in certain situations. Like, yes, for sure, you know, if it's like, my partner didn't unload the dishes again, like, you know, that if we're talking about petty things or just like, you know, the grievances that pile up in an otherwise positive relationship, then yeah, it's good for both of you to forgive and move on, as long as, you know, if it is something that needs to change, it changes. But if we're talking about something that you might consider unforgivable, like rape or assault, murder, I don't think the person who commits those things is inherently deserving of forgiveness just for the sake of it. But the person who survived those things
may need to do something.
Yeah, they might get something out of forgiveness, or they might not. This is the thing. It's personal. You might not feel any better if you can forgive this person. It's more, what do you need to do to reclaim your life?
And, you know, I think a good example of what you were talking about is a parent-child relationship. So as a child, people who grow up, even good parents, make mistakes. And sometimes those mistakes are devastating, or just have an impact that the parent never anticipated, never saw it coming. So you, at some point, when you become an adult, have to realize, or get to a point, if you're a person who thinks about these things, if you're self-aware, you know, and you walk through a period, or you go through a period, almost every adult does and should, where you have to figure out what your parents did, and was it good, was it bad, was it in between? Can you forgive them? Can you move on? And that's part of growing up. That's part of, you know, that's part of coming of age, is dealing with what your parents, how they raised you, how, you know, maybe you've turned out to be a different kind of person than they were. There's all kinds of things. So that kind of thing, that kind of forgiveness is wonderful, and it does allow you to move on. But if somebody has raped you or killed a loved one, I think I've gotten to a point. I understood when I was younger that some people needed to forgive, but I've had some things happen to me into my life that I would never forgive people for. And I understand it. I you know, there are other ways to feel about it. You know, some people say, oh, you should forgive but never forget. I'd rather forget.
Yeah,
I mean, exactly. I would rather those people not be a dominant part of my memory. It's not that you're going to forget it completely, but you can't obsess over it. And forgiveness sometimes requires obsessing. So it's not always healthy for you. Yeah. And the way they describe it, that forgiveness should never be permission, that is something people have struggled with. Yeah. Because especially when it's repetitive, you know, when it just keeps happening. So
and I think that is the danger of promoting forgiveness above all else, and not talking about the, you know, the potential nuances there. That the danger is, you know, if you're just saying that you must always forgive people, then that becomes, okay, then I just give everyone permission to walk all over me because I have to forgive everyone.
Yeah,
that is, yeah.
And they are choosing not to do that. They're rejecting violence, and they say at some point that leaving for them is an act of faith, because they do not want to abandon their faith. It's given them security and love at each other. It's given them each other. So their leaving is a step towards love and forgiveness, and how they demonstrate their faith. And I wrote that down, and then I wrote, I guess so.
Yeah. Yeah,
it wouldn't be mine.
I think we've done a really good job of being respectful so far, but I feel like you and I are maybe the wrong people to
have discussed this movie.
Understand the faith part of this, because so much of their discussion of their faith, I'm just like, I'm sorry, but either your God is not what the male elders are telling you he is, or he is and then he's not worth following. If your God seriously is someone who thinks that y'all should just continue to live with because this is the thing, they have set the situation that is happening here is black and white. There are some situations that are a lot more nuanced than this, but this is black and white. All of these women are like perfect angels, and what has happened to them is horrific, and it happened to the 4-year-old as well. And all of the men are complicit, because it may have only been 8 or so of them who did it, but all of the men except August have gone to bail out the dudes who raped the 4-year-old.
And maybe more so. Maybe they knew it was happening and turned a blind eye to it.
Exactly.
They never talk about that, but they had to have known because there were too many of them. It wasn't just one woman saying, hey, I was raped.
It was happening to
a bunch dozens
of them.
And dozens of them. So yeah, they had to know.
Yeah, and they repeatedly told the women that they were making it up.
Yeah.
That this was their imagination. And we see the first shot of the movie is one of the women after an attack, and she's covered in bruises.
Yeah.
You're going to tell her that she imagined it?
Yeah, and there are quite a few times where the narration is over a scene where a woman is waking up in bed, covered in blood and bruises. And there's 2 or 3 different ones. Ona is the one that is shown several times because, of course, she is the most obvious manifestation of this. She's got a baby.
The pregnancy.
She's pregnant. Yeah. So, but it happens a lot. And it's usually with this soothing narration over it by this child, which is a real difficult juxtaposition for me. And I realize that they're trying to, they're trying to not inflame people, but I'm sorry, I'm inflamed. I mean, you can use all the soft narration you want. I am outraged. I am enraged by these scenes. They happen 6 or 7 times during the movie.
Yeah.
So,
I guess at this point I'm just going to go ahead and get into my biggest criticisms here.
Well, let's go. Can we do the ending of the movie before we get into our criticisms?
Yeah, sure. Okay, sure.
So the ending of the movie, and just really quickly, is that they do decide to leave, and they have to do it. Klaus does come back. He is Mary Kay's husband, and he comes back. So they wait till he's asleep, and everybody says, we're going to meet before dawn out on the road. Bring your buggies. Bring everything you can carry, in terms of foodstuffs and equipment, anything you need. And they all bring their stuff. And when Mary Kay and her daughter arrive, they have both been beaten up by Klaus, who came home drunk, but he's passed out drunk. I was wondering when I was watching this, if he's coming down the road, because they knew he was coming home, they could see him, how are they going to get out at first light? But it turns out that he'd either, I don't know when he got drunk, if it was before, if he, came home that way, or if he sat there and drank. And for a religious community, they allow drinking? That's another question, but we'll put that aside because we're running out of time here. But anyway, so he's drinking to excess. He drinks enough to get drunk and pass out, but not before he beats the shit out of his wife and daughter. Because he can see that something's happening. I don't know how he finds out, but he knows that they're planning something. But, so he beats him up. Anyway, so everybody gathers together in the morning. The only person who doesn't leave is Frances McDormand. Her character, and I forget what her character's name is, but her daughter and granddaughter leave.
It's Scarface Young.
Oh, yeah. It was a terrible name.
Yeah.
Anyway, so she's the one person who doesn't leave. I'm not sure what the point of that is. Maybe she's afraid. I don't know. But you see her staying in her doorway after her daughter has left.
Yeah, I think she's just supposed to represent the women who are kind of so thoroughly
indoctrinated.
Brainwashed by the community.
Yes,
that they can't.
So she doesn't leave, but she's the only one. Everybody else leaves. Her daughter and granddaughter leave.
Yeah. At first, it looks like her daughter and granddaughter aren't going to because it looks like she's going to force them not to. But then they sneak out later and leave. They
get into everybody's buggies. The people who can walk. The ones who don't. So you see this long trail of buggies and people walking, and they're leaving. And then Davy fucking Jones plays us off. Yeah. And I am not kidding. It's like, all of a sudden we hear Davy Jones of the Monkees. This is another. So that's the end of the movie. He plays us off.
Yeah, final criticisms. I am going to save one of them for my hottest take, but I'll go into my other ones. So yeah, I mean, basically, okay, so one of my issues with the movie is kind of represented by one of Ona's lines, which is, when we've liberated ourselves, we will have to ask ourselves who we truly are. And the issue for me that this represents is it feels like this whole movie is like a movie about being in the womb. None of these women actually really get a chance to self-actualize and become full people. It's like the whole movie is a debate over whether or not they're going to become full people, and that happens sometime in the future. And that's just, it's frustrating to me because it feels like this whole movie is stalled out on a question whose answer is obvious. And again, part of this frustration is they never actually debate whether they're gonna stay and fight. That it's supposed to be a debate between leaving or staying and fighting, but functionally it's a debate between leaving and doing nothing, because they don't, like, apart from Salome's occasional outbursts of anger, none of them ever really entertain staying and fighting at all, and they never discuss the logistics of that, which, if you're not going to discuss the logistics of it, then you're not really discussing it. Because none of them really has a moment where they sit down and think through it of like, okay, if we're gonna stay and fight, and by fight we mean kill these men, what would that look like? We probably won't be able to take them one-on-one, so what that might look like is either getting weapons and ambushing them as they return, or waiting for them to fall asleep and ambushing them as they sleep. Are we prepared to do that?
And I think they never see the stay and fight idea as anything other than physical violence. So, yeah. And this
I don't think there is another option.
I think in a more educated, literate society there would be, but these women have no education. They don't know what history has taught us about revolution, for example. They probably don't even understand that concept.
Yeah, so, but also we're talking about, like, I mean, I know you mentioned, essentially like civil disobedience. I don't think that would work with these men. We are talking about men who think these women should shut up about not just the rapes, but the rape of the 4-year-old. Any man that can, as far as I'm concerned, all of the men except for August are essentially co-conspirators. They're complicit. I don't think these are men that you can reach. So as far as I'm concerned, I think the only real fight option is physical violence.
And which for them is murder. And again, How would they do it? They don't think they have any concept of how they would do it. Yeah.
Exactly. So
they live in a country of laws. So if they commit murder, they're going to go to prison themselves. I mean, there's just not an option for them.
Yeah. So I just feel like it sets up a false debate, and then the debate ends up actually being, do we stay and forgive them, or do we leave and forgive them? That forgiveness is just sort of a given. There's kind of apart from Salome, there's kind of no point where there's any idea that they're not gonna forgive them. It's more like, how do we forgive them? And that's how do we live with it? To me.
I think it takes I think they realize that they can't stay and fight, but it takes them a long time to get there. Yeah. And once they do get there, it is okay. That's it. We got to go.
But like the process of getting there is not the process of them realizing that like logistically they can't do it. It's more this back and forth discussion over whether they can just stay and continue to put up with it. And I'm just like, that's not a real question. Mm-hmm. That's not a real debate.
Although Salome thinks she can do it. Salome is absolutely convinced she can do it.
But she's the only one who's actually talking about fighting. Yeah. This is what I'm saying.
The Everyone
else is debating whether we stay and do nothing or leave.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'm sorry, if you have the ability to ask that question, there is only one answer. In this situation.
And then that's not what that wasn't the assignment. They didn't understand the assignment.
Yeah.
Because at the very beginning there was a vote, and there were 3 different things: stay and fight, stay and forgive, leave. And nobody wanted to stay and forgive. It was either stay and they were supposed to be discussing stay and fight or leave. That was it, not the forgive part. None of the other women wanted, or there weren't enough votes. Yeah.
They didn't actually end up debating that, which just makes the whole movie feel a little pointless to me. Like, for the whole time, I'm just like, I don't understand how this is a debate. We are talking about a situation that is so black and white. These men have never treated you like full humans. Half of your dialogue right now is about how these men don't treat you like human beings. And what has just happened is everyone in this room has experienced months of serial rape, including the child who now has a venereal disease. this is such a black and white situation that I don't see how there's a debate. And that just makes so much of watching this movie feel kind of repetitive and navel-gazy. And like, there is definitely plenty of beautiful dialogue. There are some really lovely points. It's just, it kind of felt like the movie equivalent of, this could have been an email. This could have been an essay in like a Mary Wollstonecraft book.
Yeah. I think the discussion is important to them because it helps them move along the path to getting where they need to be to leave. But I do agree with you that there should have been more discussion of staying and fighting and what that would mean for them. They talk about it for just a minute. I mean, a couple of minutes at the end, you know, where Mary Kay talks about, or Salome talks about how she would kill. And she's the only one. And that's what's the word I want? That's what causes the other women to realize they can't do that.
Yeah.
So if that's what you mean by stay and fight, we can't do it. We're going to have to leave. I do think there's a lot of discussion about it, but not enough on the violence part of it.
I also feel like there was never a very clear moment of them rejecting the male elder's interpretation of God. And I felt like that was like, they end in a place of the only.
How do they get to decide? I think I said that earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do the men get to decide who gets into heaven and what the criteria is for that?
Exactly. And especially, how do the men who have already decided that the rapists are fine get to decide whether or not the women get into heaven? So yeah, like, I am saving my final full argument for my hottest take, but I did want to make a quick point about Daydream Believer. I feel like this movie is really black and white. It has presented a really black and white situation. I think it is kind of the epitome of, you know, the perfect victim story. And I feel like Daydream Believer kind of reflects that. I love the song. It's one of my favorite Monkey songs. But it is a very simple, straightforward song. It's got a simple but catchy tune, and the lyrics are very simple and straightforward. It's a very quintessential like 60s love song that's, you know, super sunny and
Homecoming Queen. Yeah, just the title. Daydream Believer.
Very basic kind of daydream imagery. Homecoming Queen.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's a part where he says, "You used to think of me as a white knight on his steed." You know, it's very like basic fairy tale imagery. And I think it kind of represents the hope of the modern world / the hope of them leaving and leaving behind some of the past. And that's interesting, but I feel like that also points to what I see as one of the major weaknesses of the film, which is that this situation is black and white grim, and they are presenting the hope of tomorrow as like black and white good. Daydream Believer, there is no darkness in the song Daydream Believer, and there is no nuance, and that is kind of our only representation of the quote-unquote modern day. And that song is, 50 years old? I'm not sure exactly what year it came out in, but it was a long time ago. Like, it's not exactly a modern pop song. It's a 60s pop song, and even at the time, it was a pretty simplistic song. There are a lot more complicated, complex songs from that time period.
Including other songs by the Monkees, by the way.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's like the most simplistic Monkees song.
It totally is. Yeah,
and it's just. There is something a little bit frustrating about the fact that this movie has basically set up a Mennonite rapist men bad, future good kind of dichotomy.
Well, and if it's okay, I will add to that. So, you know, is this a feminist movie? Is it a movie about how damaging religion can be for people who are not at the top, or for anyone? Is it a movie about how any oppressed people crawl and scratch their way into freedom and autonomy, and how hard that is? Almost impossibly so. Look at how long African Americans have been scratching their way to equity, hundreds of years. And as they walk through all these ideas, when they talk about it, and that's where the title comes from, Women Talking, I think they come to the right conclusion. I think they do have to leave because murder is wrong. Murder is two wrongs don't make a right, and unless it's self-defense. And it is self-defense, but proving that is really hard in this kind of a situation. So they make the right choice for themselves and for their community of women. But it's a fucking depressing movie. And it's not, I don't find anything hopeful in it, because even though they leave and even though they make the right choice, they weren't given a lot of good choices. And where are they going? This was what you're saying, that unlimited potential future. It's not. They are women with no skills. They cannot read. They cannot write.
I
they
think
can
they do
farm.
have skills. They just don't have modern skills.
They don't have anything that they can put on a resume, and they're we don't know where they're moving into. So it's a fantasy ending. It's a fairy tale ending, because we're being asked to believe, to completely suspend disbelief, that there was a future out there waiting for them. I mean, you have to take this movie within the environment of the movie, within its constraints, within its parameters. You can't, say, oh, well, the original story, blah, blah, blah. Well, no, in this movie, we were being expected to believe, we were told to believe that they have a great future waiting for them, and it's not out there. I can't believe that. They don't, they're leaving with the clothes on their back and a couple of sackfuls of seed, and their children who they have to feed. Where are they going to go? This is not a hopeful ending. They're marching off to their death, as far as I'm concerned. And unless they just go down the road a little bit and set up, camp, and it's like, where are they going to live? Where are all these women going to go? Is there going to be some kind of organization out there who takes them in, educates them, and whatever? And it being 2010, that is supposed to, I guess, give us a little bit of a hint. But that it is modern times, and they are in America, and maybe they can get some help. But I don't see it happening. I think that, but the other thing too that they've talked about, and we didn't really focus on very much, is that there was a lot of their discussion, there was a big chunk of it, where they talked about how they would take their 12 to 15-year-old sons, and then later on, if some of the men wanted to join them, they could. And they keep this discussion going for a while. And I'm like, I want to hit them upside the head. Yeah. What are you talking about? And then one of them, I think I forget who it is. It might be Una says, then why would we leave if we're just going to set up a new colony somewhere else with the same men? What's the point of that? So that they drop that discussion, but it takes up 10 or 15 minutes of the movie. Yeah. And so because I think they understand, what are they going to do if they leave? What are they going to do if they leave? How are they going to survive? They don't answer that question. They leave it up to our imagination, but it's not a happy ending. It's not a hopeful ending. It's not a happy ending. It's a tragic ending. And I hate this movie.
Yeah, well, do we want to just to kind of?
That's my hot take.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, what is your hottest take? Your hottest.
That
take?
Is my hottest take. That this is just a fucking depressing movie, and I had to watch it twice. I watched it the first time because everybody was talking about how great it was. I thought, I'll watch this. This is back in maybe December, January of last year. As people were talking about it on social media, what a great movie it was, and I watched it. I remember the first time gripping the arms of my chair in horror throughout and I think I had to watch it in two different parts, because I thought, I can't watch any more of this. It's like Schindler's List to me. Schindler's List, I had to stop when the young woman gets killed and he shoots her in the head and she's like the best character in the movie. I had to stop watching the damn movie and didn't come back to it. I think I had to check it back into Blockbuster and turned it in late because I couldn't, it took me a week to get back to it. I just couldn't do it. And that's how I felt with this one, but I only had 48 hours to finish watching it in. So I just like, this is a terrible movie. And then I had to watch it again this week for a podcast. So I'm not happy about this film.
Hey, you were the one who wanted us to watch it. I didn't want to watch it.
I know. Well, because it seemed to relate. And honest to God, I think next time we should talk about the Barbie movie, because we've now had two kind of semi-depressing movies in a row. And I would just like to throw in my hottest take is that everybody should go see the Barbie movie if you haven't, because it is inspiring and humorous and intelligent, and it's just a wonderful, thorough assessment of feminism and the reality of modern women's lives. So that's my hot take.
I think there's a real tension in this movie between the fact that the writers and filmmakers are educated, privileged white women, and the subjects of this movie are marginalized women who in reality do not have any of those privileges.
They don't have any autonomy at all. Yeah,
it's privileged women putting words into the mouths of completely unprivileged women.
And these women are illiterate. And they speak in this amazing dialogue that was written for them by these privileged women. It's not believable.
I think that's why so much of the movie feels so pointless to me, because they have set up this black and white scenario that isn't what the real scenario would be like. In the real scenario, they wouldn't have this opportunity to leave, and they wouldn't have this ability to philosophize like they're in a frickin' lecture class in grad school, because once you have that level of privilege, there is no real question. You just leave. They're using this, they being the creators are using this scenario to philosophize about the place of women, and it just rings kind of hollow to me because they haven't really experienced what these women have experienced, and the real status of women in the modern world is a lot more complicated than what's happening here. And so that brings me to my hottest take, which is, I think this is a conservative movie. When you make a movie where the survivors are so perfect and the crimes so egregious, and the reaction to that crime is so demure, it's just leaving, that even the most conservative, regressive voices in this country could not possibly object to anything that happens in this movie. Have you made a feminist movie? I don't think so.
No. I think you made a Christian movie. You made a movie about a religion. Yeah.
Because and here's the thing, I after I watched it on Amazon, and I looked at the reviews, and the first positive review was written by a man who was just so impressed by watching women suffer and seeing how their love for their daughters overcame it all. And I was just like, this movie is pandering. This is a pandering movie. This is a movie that is incredibly safe and basically just wants to make us feel better that men aren't this bad in the modern world. And the problem with that is that it completely obscures the much more complicated issues that are our real world issues. And that there's been a lot of discourse recently about how we deal with real world survivors of rape. And I think this movie actually does most of them a disservice, because a big problem that we see in real world rape and assault cases is if the victim is not absolutely perfect and the crime is not absolutely black and white, it almost never goes in favor of the survivor. I mean, only 2% of rape cases even get prosecuted to begin with. And when they do, we often tear apart the women in those cases because, they wore a short skirt one time. They've been drunk before. And like, when your movie about rape creates this black and white world where like the victims include a 4-year-old, and like none of these women have ever even like stood up to their abusers before, this isn't helping real world survivors, because real world survivors are complicated and their situations are complicated. And if the only cases of rape that we can agree on are ones like this, then we're actually not helping the vast majority of survivors. So,
So what's the point of this movie?
Exactly. Like, yeah. I could see this movie maybe being helpful for someone who is a survivor and
I don't know,
some kind of catharsis.
Maybe.
But on the other hand, I feel like this movie is ultimately really conservative, and what it adds to the narrative is the opposite of helpful.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my take. I don't think it's a feminist movie. I think it's a conservative movie.
I agree with you 100%.
Apologies to anyone who kept listening after I explained at the beginning that I don't like this movie. All right. And I guess that's our final thoughts. Did you have any other final thoughts to add?
If you haven't seen it, I can't recommend that you do.
Same.
I say it as somebody who loves movies, and it's very seldom that I've ever walked out in a movie. I have. And I've stopped watching movies, that I've paid for at home for sure. But this is one that I'm just not sure it's worth your time.
Yeah. I did have one final point to make that you might want to say something about as well. I think it is really telling that this movie was nominated for Best Picture and The Woman King wasn't.
Isn't it?
Because The Woman King is about complicated women, and this one is not. This is just your perfect example of a perfect victim story that conservatives can get on board with, and it's about white women, which conservatives can also get on board with, whereas The Woman King is telling stories about complicated Black women who are capable of violence, who have done things that maybe we don't. I mean, the women in the Woman King do kill. They do kill, and they don't
feel guilty about it. They don't feel guilty about it. And it's not, and it's almost part of their religion, quote unquote, that they are warriors. That is their religion. They are warriors.
So The Woman King basically does not appeal to our white male gaze, and this movie does.
And I'm not advocating violence. I am a pacifist whenever it's possible. I'm a conditional pacifist. But I do think that sometimes you have to fight back. And sometimes that is going to involve violence. I have seen comments by people, let's go back to 2000, after the Summer of Righteous protests over the killing of Mr. Floyd. George Floyd, right? Yeah. And people were upset that property was being damaged in these protests. And all I could think was, that upsets you? That's what upsets you. That's what upsets you. Okay, not that he was killed, not that he called for his mother while he lay there dying. No, none of that upsets you. Not that Black men are killed all the time by police, and women too. A couple of women have been killed. And that Black people live in fear when they get in their car and drive their kids to school that they're going to be pulled over. None of that upsets you as much as somebody broke a window or painted graffiti on a wall. That's what upsets you. Really?
Yep. The damage to inanimate objects is what's important here. Not the loss of human lives.
And how are they supposed to react? You are killing them, and they're not supposed to kill you back. That's what violence is. That you're saying nonviolence is great for the victims. The victims should never be violent.
Yeah.
But the aggressors can be violent. Okay, that's my high horse. I'm getting off of it now.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I would rather watch 10 The Woman Kings than another one of women talking.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay, so that, dear listeners, is all for today.
Yep. I'm Tessa Dare. You can find me at my website, tessadare.com, where you can sign up for my email list, or you can follow me on Instagram or TikTok or Threads at author.tess.adair, and that's TESS.ADAIR.
And maybe when I said that, dear listeners, is all for today, I should have followed it with woo, because this was a long one. Anyway, so I'm Beth Von Bear, and you can follow me on Instagram and Threads at STL_writer_Beth, or you can sign up for my weekly Substack email, Saturday Morning Musings, at stlwriterbeth.substack.com. This has been Women Inherits the Earth. Woman Inherits the Earth. Our not terribly fun and witty podcast today. It was pretty serious. We usually say it was fun and witty, but today it was pretty serious podcast from the perspective of a mother and daughter about women in film. Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed it, or at least got something out of it, because today's was a little rough. And we'll tune in for our next episode in 2 weeks. See you then.